Today we're kayaking the Gila River. We're actually doing a 2-day trip, 22 miles long. We'll be camping about 2/3 of the way down the river tonight. Join us as we enjoy the beauty along this river from our trip in April of 2014. At Hidden Gems of Nature, I don't tell you what the destination is. Instead, I give you clues so you can explore and discover these hidden gems or your own hidden gems. So watch carefully as we identify clues to find these destinations. And remember, subscribe to Hidden Gems of Nature YouTube channel. This is the put-in spot for the Gila River. It's extremely well marked. There's even some picnic tables up there and a designated parking area, very easy to find, and a very easy place to put your boats in. As you can tell, the water is very clear, which is unlike the Gila River, which is usually very silty. We hadn't gone 200 or 300 yards, and one of the boys said they had a leak in their kayak. Pulled the kayak out to find the leak. Every kayak trip I go on, I take duct tape and something called a solder it. So if I need to do any emergency welding, I can along the river. Here's a picture of what that looks like. It's like a Bic lighter on steroids. It's come in handy a couple of times. We didn't need it for this trip. We just used duct tape and it worked just fine. The beginning section of this river is mostly class 1s. You usually spend the first 6 miles or so in class 1 rapids. There's a couple of class 2s along the way, but it's a good warm-up section for beginners before you get into the larger rapids after the confluence of the San Francisco. The Gila River has a lot of barbed wire fences that cross it. This section of the river only has a couple, and you hit them right in the very beginning. The lower section of the Gila has a lot more. But this is the only place where I've ever seen a warning sign. There's lots of cliffs on this section of the Gila River. It's really pretty. Lots of formations, lots of interesting rock colorations. So it's kind of fun to look at the cliffs as you go down the river. We'll shoot down this section of the river and then turn around and take some video of the other kayakers as they come down this section of the river. This member of the group is relatively new. He got turned around at the beginning of the rapid and went down backwards. I think he was just showing off. One thing you always have to worry about on Arizona rivers are strainers, and of course here's one right here. You can see that this is not a particularly easy strainer to get through. If the water was higher and faster, we'd probably just go to the right of it, but with it as low as it is, we got to go through it. If you're not familiar with a strainer, it's what you rinse your pasta off with after you cook it. The water goes through and the pasta gets stuck. In the river, your kayak gets stuck and the water goes through, and they can be somewhat dangerous. Fortunately, there's not a lot of them on this end of the river. The biggest problem with strainers is they're oftentimes in the main current. There's a hot spring along the river that someone had commercialized at one time. So we stopped where the hot spring comes out. It's actually very hot, and hiked back to where they had commercialized it. In fact, I didn't realize how hot it was until we were taking the kayaks out of the river, and I stepped into the seep where the hot spring water comes into the river. Boy, I didn't make that mistake again. You can also see from this vantage point how clear the water is and how well you can see down into the water. In fact, you can see the fish swimming down in the water. It's kind of cool. Here's one of those lone rock formations as we're going down the river. Kind of stands out, nice little hidden gem. It's not uncommon for these kayaks to fill up with water. They have large cockpits, and so as we hit the larger wave trains, the water pours into the boat. All of the boys have mini skirts to kind of keep the water from getting into the boat. But on occasion, enough water gets in that the kayak becomes unstable and the boys turn it over and have to get out and empty it. Here we are approaching our campsite. What's nice about this campsite is it's right up against this cliff, so in the evening, if there's a lot of wind coming up the canyon, this shelters us from the wind. I've camped at this campsite a couple of times. It's really well protected and a very nice campsite. This is the beginning of our second day on the trip. This section, the first day of the trip, was about 13.5 miles. The last day of the trip will be about 8.5 miles. And it's almost all Class 2 rapids with some Class 1s interspersed. It's a lot of fun. Hadn't been on the river for more than about an hour. On the second morning, we came across this Coatimundi, or Coatimundi, or however you pronounce it, but kind of a fun treat to see this little animal while we were going down the river. My son Noah, he happened to be the garbage scow today, so we keep all the garbage on the bow of his boat. He's the most experienced and lightest, so we figured it was safe putting it on his kayak to let him pack out what we packed in. On this trip, the river was flowing at about 90 to 95 cubic feet per second. For a comparison, look at the Gila River #1 video on my YouTube channel, and that was flowing at about a 700. You can tell it's a completely different river just based on the flows. And even though it's a different river, both flows were very fun to run the river on. They both brought different challenges. Believe it or not, at the 90 to 95, you had to be more technical because you were dodging more rocks. Again, a lot of fun either way. Both of these trips were taken in April. April of 2020 was obviously wetter than April of 2014 on this other trip. Have a great time on the river. One of the boys got his kayak stuck in this little slot. Fortunately, he was fine, but it took a lot of time to get that kayak unstuck from that slot. We're out of the narrow section of the canyon now. The canyon's starting to open up, which means we're getting closer to our out spot. In fact, this large wall signals our out spot. You can tell what it is because it's got a large lip. Right there on river left, you can see the large lip that sticks out at the base of the cliff. And there's the truck and the out spot. Enjoy yourself as you explore and discover all the fun and beauty along the Gila River.